Walk into a Vauxhall dealership on a wet Tuesday morning and you'll find more staff than customers. Same story at a Fiat showroom in Slough, a DS boutique in Chelsea, a Lotus dealer in the Midlands. The lights are on, the kettle's warm, nobody's coming through the door. And it's not because the cars are bad, some of them are genuinely brilliant. It's because Britain has quietly, brutally fallen out of love with an entire tier of car brands, and the sales figures from the last 12 months read less like a market report and more like a death certificate. Here's the thing that makes this so strange. The UK new car market just had its best year since before COVID. Over 2 million new registrations in 2025, the first time we've cracked that number since the pandemic locked the whole country in its living room. So the money is out there. People are buying cars, just not these cars. While Volkswagen and Toyota and Kia are practically printing money at their dealer network, a handful of once proud names are watching their sales charts fall off a cliff edge, and some of them might not be around by the end of the decade. We've dug through the SMMT registration data, the dealer network filings, and the financial results nobody wants to talk about at the AGM to find out exactly who's on the brink. Some of these you'll have guessed already. One of them might genuinely surprise you. And by the end of this, you'll understand why the car parked outside your neighbor's house might be a collector's item sooner than anyone expected. There's a pattern worth watching for as we go through these, because it isn't the same story 6 times over. Some of these brands are dying because the product genuinely stopped making sense for the money. Some are dying because a parent company made a calculated decision to walk away from a slice of the market on purpose, betting everything on a smaller, richer slice instead. And some are simply victims of timing, caught between rising interest rates, patchy charging infrastructure, and a British buyer who's grown far more cautious with every trip to the supermarket. Keep that distinction in mind, because it changes what brink of extinction actually means for each one. Some of these names could vanish from British roads within 18 months. Others might shrink down to a niche so small it barely counts as a mainstream brand anymore, limping on in a handful of showrooms for the collectors and the diehards. Let's start with the brand that's fallen furthest, fastest. Fiat. Fiat used to mean something on a British street. The original 500 was a design icon. The Panda was the car your mum learnt to drive in. For decades, Fiat was the affordable, cheeky, slightly chaotic Italian option that undercut the mainstream Japanese and German brands on price while offering just enough personality to make the school run bearable. That version of Fiat is gone. In the first quarter of 2026, Fiat posted a 60% collapse in UK registrations, one of the single worst performances of any established brand in the entire market. Not a dip, not a wobble, 60% gone. In 12 months, part of the story is self-inflicted. From the 1st of July 2025, Fiat pulled every single non-electrified vehicle from UK sale. No more cheap petrol Panda. No more budget diesel options for the fleet buyers who kept the brand afloat for years. Just electric, at electric prices, in a market where the average British buyer still isn't convinced. Strip out the affordable end of your lineup in the middle of a cost of living squeeze, and well, you get 60%. Owners on Fiat forums have been saying it plainly for months now. They loved the brand for being cheap and cheerful, and cheap left the building the day the Panda did. There's a wider Stellantis problem sitting underneath this too. Fiat shares its parent company with Vauxhall, Citroën, DS, Peugeot and Alfa Romeo, and when one of those brands wobbles, the group's UK dealer network feels it across the board. Franchise operators who once ran a Fiat and an Abarth showroom side by side have started quietly handing back the keys to those franchises, rather than keep the lights on for a trickle of walk-ins. That's not speculation, that's happening right now in towns like Ripon, where dealers have exited the brand outright, rather than keep losing money on it. And here's the part that should worry Fiat more than the raw numbers. Abarth, its sporty sub-brand, is down over 70% to just a few hundred cars a year nationwide. When your performance halo car is selling in numbers, a single dealership used to shift in a good month. That's not a downturn. That's a brand running on fumes, in a market that's about to decide whether it's worth keeping the lights on at all. Picture the scene at a typical Fiat forecourt on a Saturday now. A salesperson who's been there 15 years, who used to have 3 or 4 families walking the lot at once, arguing over paint colors for a new 500. Now it's one browser every couple of hours, mostly there to ask about servicing an older car they already own. That's the texture behind a 60% drop, not just a line on a spreadsheet, but a showroom that's gone quiet in a way everyone who works there can feel. DS Automobiles. If Fiat's decline is steep, DS Automobiles is in genuine freefall, and most British drivers won't even notice, because most British drivers couldn't tell you what a DS actually is. Launched as Citroen's premium spin-off, styled to compete with Audi and Mercedes on French flair rather than German engineering, DS has spent a decade searching for an audience that simply hasn't turned up. The numbers from the first half of 2025 are almost unbelievable for an established, factory-backed manufacturer. Just 112 cars registered across the entire United Kingdom in 6 months. Compare that to 948 in the same period the year before. That's not a slowdown, that's an 88% collapse, and it puts DS's UK sales below what some independent classic car dealers shift out of a single lot. The flagship N-Degree 8, the car meant to be DS's answer to a proper executive saloon, has found just 70 buyers since launch, including the demonstrators the dealers drove home themselves. Ask anyone who's actually spent time in a DS showroom and they'll tell you the same thing. The cars aren't the problem, the confusion is. Nobody in Britain grew up wanting a DS the way they grew up wanting a BMW or a Jaguar. There's no badge loyalty to fall back on, no decades of advertising lodged in the national memory, just a French luxury experiment that arrived a generation too late to build one. DS wants to be, in their own words, the Chanel of cars. The trouble is Chanel didn't need showrooms in slough retail parks sitting empty on a Saturday afternoon. There is a genuine fight back planned. New N-Degree 4 and N-Degree 7 models are meant to rebuild the range from the ground up, but with sales this thin, the dealer network itself is the fragile part now. You can't sell cars from showrooms that have already closed, and DS forums are full of owners asking, only half joking, whether they'll be able to get parts in 5 years' time. Sit in a DS N-Degree 8 for 5 minutes, and you'll understand the tragedy of it. Nappa leather stitched by hand, a dashboard that genuinely feels like nowhere else on the market, switchgear with a satisfying, expensive click to it. It's a properly good car. It's just a properly good car that almost nobody in Britain has heard of, parked next to badges people have trusted since before their parents were born. You can't out-engineer 80 years of brand memory in a decade, and DS is finding that out the hard way, one empty showroom at a time. Jaguar. Now here's the one that'll genuinely stop you in your tracks, because Jaguar isn't some niche import, it's one of the most storied names in British motoring history, the badge on Le Mans winners, the car in 100 period dramas, the E-Type that Enzo Ferrari himself once called the most beautiful car ever made. And in January 2026, Jaguar registered precisely 6 new cars in the entire United Kingdom. 6, down from 783 in the same month a year earlier. That's a 99% collapse, and if you saw that number without context you'd assume the brand had already gone under. It hasn't, technically. What's actually happened is a deliberate, brutal reset. Jaguar Land Rover made the call to stop production of every existing Jaguar model at the end of 2024, axing the XE, XF, F-Type and F-Pace in one go, in order to relaunch the brand as an all-electric, ultra-premium marque aimed squarely at Bentley and Rolls-Royce territory. No new petrol Jaguars. No cheaper models to keep the showrooms busy, just a long, empty gap where a British institution used to be. Then, just to make things worse, a cyber attack in September 2025 shut down Jaguar Land Rover's production systems entirely for weeks, delaying the relaunch further and leaving thousands of workers on furlough while engineers rebuilt the network from scratch. Dealers who signed up to sell Jaguars have spent over a year with almost nothing to put on the forecourt. Here's what the comment sections keep circling back to though, and it's worth saying out loud. A lot of long-time Jaguar owners genuinely mourn this. Not because the strategy is wrong. Repositioning as an electric luxury brand might well be the smartest long-term move JLR has ever made, but because it means the affordable, driver-focused Jaguar, the one a regular enthusiast could actually save up for, is gone and isn't coming back. The new electric flagship, revealed toward the end of 2025, is a genuinely stunning 4-door GT. It's also priced to compete with cars most of us will never park in our own driveway. Britain didn't stop loving Jaguar. Jaguar simply decided it didn't want most of Britain as a customer anymore. Lotus, Hethel, Norfolk, has been building some of the greatest drivers' cars in the world since 1966, on a shoestring budget, with a philosophy so famous it's practically scripture among enthusiasts. Simplify, then add lightness. That's Lotus. And right now, that legendary factory is bleeding money at a rate that should terrify anyone who cares about British manufacturing. In the first half of 2025, Lotus delivered just 2,813 cars globally, a 43% collapse from the year before. The Emira, the brand's flagship petrol sports car, and the one genuinely affordable real Lotus left in the range, saw deliveries crash by 64%, down to 891 units worldwide in 6 months. That's a car magazines called one of the best driving sports cars of the last decade, and buyers simply aren't showing up for it. The company posted an operating loss of over $260 million in that same period and announced plans to cut up to 550 jobs at Hethel itself. nearly half the workforce at the plant that built the Elise, the Exige, and every Lotus that's ever mattered to the people who love this brand. Part of it is tariffs strangling Lotus's access to its biggest markets. Part of it is delivery delays that have left customers waiting so long they've simply cancelled and bought something else instead. There was even a period where Emira imports into some markets were paused entirely, which for a sports car brand is about as close to switching off the sign above the door as you can get without actually doing it. What's kept Lotus alive at all is China, where nearly half of all deliveries now go, and where the brand's newer electric models, the Elettra and the Emea, have found an audience that barely exists back home. Lotus enthusiasts on forums have been blunt about what they think happened. The brand chased SUVs and electric luxury to chase Chinese money, and in doing so it let the cheap, brilliant, lightweight sports car that built its reputation wither on the vine. If Hethel closes, or shrinks to a shadow of itself, Britain doesn't just lose a car brand, it loses the last serious volume producer of genuinely analog sports cars this country has left. Anyone who's driven an Elise on a B-road in Norfolk on a dry summer evening knows exactly what's at stake here. The way the whole car talks to you through the seat of your trousers, the lightness Colin Chapman obsessed over 60 years ago, still baked into every panel. That's not something you can rebuild once the tooling's sold off and the workforce has scattered to other jobs. Once a factory like Hethel goes quiet, it tends to stay quiet. Citroën is the one on this list that should worry the industry the most, precisely because it isn't a niche brand or a boutique experiment. It's a mainstream mass-market name that sold family hatchbacks and vans to ordinary British households for generations, and it just posted a 31.7% drop in UK registrations, down to a little over 20,000 cars in a market that grew overall. When a volume brand loses nearly a third of its buyers in a year, the wider market is booming. That's not bad luck. That's a brand losing its grip on the people who actually keep it in business. Some of the pain is shared across the wider Stellantis group, the same parent company struggling with Fiat and DS. But Citroën has problems entirely its own, including a safety recall that's dragged on for months, with tens of thousands of vehicles needing replacement airbags and dealers straining just to get customers back on the road, let alone into a new car. Owners posting about the recall describe waits stretching well past what they were promised, and that kind of experience doesn't stay quiet. It ends up in every WhatsApp group and every schoolgate conversation about which brand to avoid next time round. And that's really the theme running underneath every single name on this list, isn't it? It's never just one thing. It's never just the styling, or just the price, or just one bad model year. It's a slow accumulation of small disappointments. A recall here, a discontinued model there, a dealer who wasn't quite as helpful as they should have been, until one day a brand that used to be a default choice on the school run has quietly become the one nobody even considers anymore. 40 Fiats. Save the strangest one for near the end, because Vauxhall isn't some struggling importer nobody's heard of. It's the Griffin badge that's been on British roads since 1857, the brand behind the Astra and the Corsa, the cars that filled up motorway service stations and company car parks in their tens of thousands for generations. And right now, Vauxhall's owner Stellantis is closing the van factory in Luton, a plant that's built vehicles in that town for well over a century, putting around 1,100 jobs at risk in one announcement. Production is being folded into Ellesmere Port instead, with a fresh £50 million pledged for the switch to electric vans. But the government has been blunt about the condition attached to that investment. If the policy environment for electric vehicles doesn't work in Vauxhall's favour, even Ellesmere Port isn't guaranteed to stay commercially viable. It's a brutal irony. Vauxhall isn't disappearing because British drivers stopped liking Corsas and Astras. Plenty of people still buy them every month. It's disappearing, factory by factory, because the economics of building cars in Britain during an EV transition have got harder than almost anyone in the industry predicted, and a company with sites across Europe will always move production toward wherever the numbers work best. Workers in Luton who watched their parents and grandparents clock in at the same gates have been left reading closure notices instead of payslips, and local business owners who built entire livelihoods around that factory's shift patterns are staring down the same uncertainty. Vauxhall isn't a boutique brand chasing an audience that doesn't exist, like DS. It's proof that even a name stitched into the fabric of British industrial history isn't safe from a market this unforgiving. We've been here before, and it's worth remembering how this story usually ends. Mitsubishi walked away from new car sales in the UK back in 2021, unable to justify the cost of meeting new emissions rules for a market share that had shrunk to barely 0.5%. For years afterwards, the brand existed here only as a name on service records and spare parts catalogues, a ghost still haunting the driveways of the people who'd bought in before the doors finally closed. And then, almost 5 years later, Mitsubishi announced it was coming back. Britain hadn't stopped wanting affordable, dependable cars. It had just stopped associating that description with the Mitsubishi badge, until the badge itself disappeared, and oddly, that absence made people miss it. That's the real lesson sitting inside every one of these numbers. None of these brands, Fiat, DS, Jaguar, Lotus, Citroën, Vauxhall, are dying because the engineering got worse. If anything, the cars themselves have never been better built, better equipped, or in Jaguar's case, more genuinely ambitious. What's dying is trust, habit, the quiet automatic loyalty that used to carry a badge through a bad year or two. Once that goes, no amount of clever electric relaunch or Chelsea showroom can buy it back overnight. So here's the honest question worth sitting with. In 5 years, will you be looking at a used Emira or a low-mileage DS Degree 8 the way people look at a Mitsubishi Evo today, kicking themselves for not grabbing one while the badge was still on the wall? Some of the cars on this list are genuinely excellent, sold by companies that simply ran out of runway before the world caught up to what they were building. History doesn't always remember the sales figures, it remembers the cars that got left behind. Tell us in the comments which of these 5 you think actually deserves to survive, and which one you reckon won't be around this time next year. And if you've owned one of these brands, we want to know, was it the car that let you down, or was it everything else around it? Stick around, because there's another British motoring story just like this one waiting for you next.